gonna have some choice words. Say it. I needed to get this out. Today I wanted to tackle more of a cult classic, and I'm not going to go into super detail talking about the intricacies of the book or anything because there are tons of reviews online that will show you that. I moreover want to talk about pluses and minuses, generally speaking, of the author and the book in general, and whether or not I think it deserves its cult-ish following. So when I say classic, I mean more in classic in the terms of a lot of people who like books have run into this book, and it's on a lot of to-read lists. And that book is Neil Gaiman's American Gods. So as an introduction to American Gods, let's talk a little bit about Neil Gaiman as an author. So Neil Gaiman is not an American author. Neil Gaiman actually came to America in the 80s, and he had a really hard time connecting to America, even though he had visited prior to that. But he started staying in America longer term in the 80s, and he lives in America semi-permanently now. Occasionally going back to the UK, but like, he's in America a lot. And it's pretty much his home away from home, and has been for many years. And in the 80s, he describes that it was the first time he started really connecting to things. He was starting to write scripts for comics, he was starting to do film scripts, and this book was because he was writing so much film script, and he intentionally wanted to make a book that wouldn't be adapted to film. Now, of course, by now, today's age, there is a TV adaptation for this, and so it is possible now, but at the time this was written, making this into any kind of movie or show wasn't really on the table. This book was published in 2001, and at that time, certain conversations about immigration, things like that, were on the table, but they weren't nearly as heated as they would be in a few years after that. And the political landscape just completely morphed after this book. But what's interesting is this book is really diverse, and it was diverse because to someone like Neil Gaiman that came here from overseas, America is diverse, and it was strange to him to make a book that wouldn't be that way. But a lot of people look at it now and they're like, wow, this is really forward thinking, which is something that has always caught Neil Gaiman as kind of odd to say, because he's like, well, that's what America is supposed to be. The political stuff that you will find in this is a lot about immigration and a lot about the problems of technology blending with old traditions, and how belief in the old ways has wavered and in some areas completely died off entirely, and how that affects us as a culture. And honestly, it is a pretty relevant topic. To be really clear though, Neil Gaiman has also gone on record more than once saying that a lot of things within this book are outdated, and if he could go back and change them, he 100% would. So I do want to make that very clear, because yeah, some stuff in this book has not aged well from 2001. It just hasn't. So my very first point that I tend to use with book reviews is the structure or genre. And this is both this book's biggest strength and greatest weakness. This is a bizarre read. It is an interesting setup, I'll grant you that. Interesting setup, interesting the world. But because it is the way it is, it doesn't cleanly fall into very many genres. You can call this urban fantasy, I think would be probably the closest to what this book is, but it's a strange urban fantasy. It also has some elements of a mystery. You don't really know who your main character really is. You don't really know much about the setup of the world and how it operates. There's a lot of mysticism. So you could categorize it a few other ways, but I think probably the most reliable would be urban fantasy, even though it doesn't follow all the tropes for it. But I'm not gonna lie, this is a really weird read, And there's a reason I do not recommend this to very many people. If this isn't a book that's naturally up your alley, like if you're not already into weird stuff anyway and getting into really bizarre what if conversations, books like this are probably going to tick you off because you will not get all the answers. You will never get all the answers. And there are going to be huge sections that you're just like, what just happened? And if you don't like digging into it, you're not going to like this book. You're just not, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's what I mean when I say that this book, its unique genre is also its greatest pullback. This is just one of those books that is not going to appeal to a larger group of people. Yet this is a book that a lot of people recommend. If someone's like, hey, I heard Neil Gaiman's good, what should I read from him? A lot of people recommend this book. And I personally wouldn't. As far as general writing structure goes, like whether or not you switch characters, you mostly focus on your main character, but you will occasionally switch to scenes with other gods and other creatures, but it usually works because they're usually trying to show a point. I think there were only 1 or 2 scenes, sadly, where I felt like the change just straight up wasn't necessary. You could have pulled that whole part out of this book and it wouldn't have changed a single thing. Because the points the scenes were making were points that had already been made in previous scenes with the main character, so it wasn't necessary. Again, this is kind of a browbeating one. Like, it's going to hit you over the head with the same concept a lot, which is one of the reasons it's pretty thick. This definitely could have been edited down quite a lot, I feel, personally. This is another part of contention, I feel like, with this book. Now, Neil Gaiman is very good about writing unique characters and making them compelling, even though there shouldn't be anything compelling about them as a character. And that's definitely the case with this. Our main lead is a pretty lackluster person, but there are a lot of strange things about him that you do genuinely try to figure out that make him interesting kind of by default, because you don't know what's going on with him as a character. I don't know, like, you ever know that person in your class or in your friend group that they're super, super low energy to the point where it almost feels like they're an energy void? That's what the main character feels like in this. He feels like an energy void, which sometimes works in his favor, but sometimes it's a bit of a drag, and it drags the story down quite a bit in parts. The typical message of this is that the past never fully goes away, that it reinvents itself, that it might have a new term, might be given new power or power being taken away, but the past will always be there. And how much power it has depends on how much power we give it. At least that's what I kind of walked away with this book. And I think there are some really good messages concerning that, and I think it's something that does need to be said. But this book is a little finicky in how it says those things. The ending specifically is very convoluted in parts, which more than one person has commented on about this book. It's not a bad ending per se, but it's a little strange. And so once again, like, this is one of those books you kind of have to dig in order to understand what it's trying to say. So if you're one of those people, you don't like to dig really deep into your stuff, this might tick you off. This might get too frustrating too quickly, which is yet one more reason why when I recommend Neil Gaiman as an author, I usually recommend other works like The Graveyard Book or one of his short stories. He has a bunch of short stories on his website, which I will also link down below, that are free legally from him that you can just read whenever you want. They're older, so they're not as good as the How to Talk to Girls at Parties, which is a newer short work, but like they're pretty decent, and I would recommend them if you're bored and want to try out his stuff. But yeah, this book, my closing thoughts on stuff like this is that, why is it so popular? Why is this the one that's well known? I'm going to tell you right here and now, the reason this book is something so many people who like his stuff recommend is because, and this is my personal opinion, but I think people recommend this because they want to seem smart. I really do believe that. I believe people recommend this. People recommend this book because they want to seem super, super intelligent, and they really kind of get off on the idea of being smarter than those around them. And because this is so kind of meta and out there, people feel really artsy and expressive when they recommend this. Because heaven forbid we as an adult recommend a children's book to another adult to read. That would just be childish. It's a good book. What I would like to normalize just reading a good book, regardless of whether it's a children's book or an adult book. Like, just read. It's a good book. Some of the best books I've ever read are children's books. Once again, like I mean, look at this thing. It's massive. Yes, this is well written, but it has aged a lot. When people recommend books like this, I raise both eyebrows for good reason. Look guys, I'm a literature major, okay? I had to be in the same room with some of the most pretentious people. They would take Latin as their second language, and which is fine. I actually have no problem with that, especially when you're going to apply that to do your own research. Good for you, that's awesome. And there were a few people that's why they took it, and that's fine. They were cool. But most of them did it for bragging points. And they were some of the most obnoxious people I've met in my life. And they would do this. They would recommend books like this. And they'd say, yeah, it's not for everybody, but you know, not everyone can get meta writing. Shut up. Like, honestly, I would recommend most of Neil Gaiman's works before I would recommend this one. This one's just so niche. And if you're into that niche kind of stuff, you probably will like it. You probably will, because it is well written, but it is niche. I feel like a lot of people use this book to beat up on others and make themselves feel more intelligent. And I just, it's cringe. So yes, I am working on The Savior's Champion. I have a lot of thoughts on that. That should be the next book review I do. I know that Becca C. Smith recently came out with a book as well, and guys, I'm so torn on whether or not to read that kind of a book. It's clearly a romance, and it's one of those supernatural romances, and oh guys, I really dislike supernatural books. And then a romance on top of that, I don't know if my soul can take it, but I don't know. I might sample a few pages, see how I feel about it. It is on Kindle Unlimited, so at least the first book is, so maybe I'll try it out, I don't know. But right now, I'm sticking, I need to stick it out and finish Savior's Champion. I'm not having the best time with it, unfortunately, so I'm gonna have some choice words. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. I can't promise any kind of upload schedule these days, well, with my job and my emotional and my health problems, but I'm gonna try. I do like to be able to post my thoughts on things, even if people don't interact with them. It just, I don't know. I need to say it. I needed to get this out. I feel like I needed to get this out. So thank you for letting me take this off my chest. I clearly have frustrations from college that I still bear on my shoulders, apparently. So the more you know.